Yeah, because women were injured beyond all reach of injuries, and their mind state was not healthy enough to go into the new world. But if I could tell them anything, it'll be the same thing I told Johnny Soto the other day in the afterlife. And it means that women can go into the new world kingdom, but they can't go with the way of thinking that they had in the earth, because it's not prepared to take on the life, lordship, and love offering of all things imaginable, which is not necessarily confined to any gang culture or root AJ, but it could be. So understand that I'm not saying it for any reason in particular, but I will say that if women were there, then it was a reason. But the reason they're there is not the same reason they were in the earth. And that's true. So by the time this recording is finished, they'll know the difference between the battle of Cheraje and the battle of the Pixies. Because the women were poisoned and misled about doing things wrong. But the way of thinking of going into the new world would not be the same one on the panic road, if you know what I'm saying. So for good God and good love measure, y'all don't play games with G Code Gadget. And if a woman ever told you that you were the mister, make sure you would tell her that she was the extra, because that's the only way to go without protection. And so if spirit creatures doing things like that and they don't care about what they saying, then that's the reason for it. The battle of Mitsubishi Wajeto is a time in history where creatures in the afterlife are fighting God Edraso in a different way. And they're doing so in a way that wasn't predicted by the Bible. But they're doing so well that God himself couldn't remember what was happening at the time. But to know that they're fighting God this blatantly and boldly for over 28 years and worse, they quick to say Hama Westreato, which is to give credit to another Cryesra. But God they know and love is not the one there, because God had different Kairos, when he had times in the sky to say why I'm here and times in the sky to say why I'm gone. But with God, they knew who he was at the time of his presence. But they did not keep it a second, because he had different interests in their codices. But the righteous innocent is not someone who is guided by fear, timidity, or trepidation. Because the righteous innocent know beyond all things that righteousness is the source of the peasants, no matter what, like breasts. So without righteousness, things against it is powerless. But if the devil rise up and tell you personally, outside of tradition, Bible, or culture, that you are being tormented by him or mankind in a way that never was before, for today and forever, then that means when you do get to heaven, which you must, you'll be more blessed than all them by red trays. You'll be so blessed that nobody else would care about anything else, and you'll be so blessed that you yourself would care about anything else. Because even these recordings give blessings in the afterlife, but over time people will become less and less spiritually inclined. This time in history was especially spiritual. The afterlife was doing things that it never did before, and nobody else will care. But I'm the one who was creating all these gospel quotations, recordings, and things. Even though they was in a different way, they still said the same general theme and message. It's the gospel of love, Christship, offering, and source of Nueve Radio. So in the afterlife of heaven. And this was before I was fully aware of the afterlife in this lifetime. And so I'm speaking these things because I feel compelled and guided, and they give me joy and pleasure, right? So at the time when I'm writing these poems or saying these recordings, it's the same time, right? So whenever anybody hear this recording, they'll know that I fought a fight that was so severe and intense, I wasn't supposed to see it, know it, or hear it. And I was there the whole time, and I did, consciously aware, and I won in a different way than what they thought or expected me to beat up with. And so I did. Now when the righteous fight the wicked, we in a different type of camaraderies. You got spiritual warfare on Picadot Radio Demons. Then you got things that mankind mixed up accidentally in high testing labs and high priest press trials in the modern world era. And they mixed up things between man and spirit and sorcery and triangles. And they mixed it all together to create things. That will kill the sword and kill the rabbit. And these are not no games to play with these people. But they fight in war every day in the afterlife sorcery with ravings and such, as if it's a normal practice. But what they've whipped up is the worst thing that ever happened to mankind, even though it's casually accepted as being something less. So the world is over. It's all angel beings know. They know angels exist, and I treat it casually because they taught me. But they'll know that angels were here for a purpose, and they're never there just arbitrarily walking. Because if an angel is just walking somewhere and you can see it in plain sight, it's the worst judgment known to all things that ever happened in the universe. And it's so cliche to hear it that people wouldn't care. But it's really, really something to make note of. Because if an angel is there, you will know it. But if you yourself was told to do something that nobody else was supposed to do, and you had no choice but to try, then you are not in contempt or at fault of anything that's going to the sky. Because anybody that's going to heaven will already know if you was righteous, then you the one to fly. Which is obvious and blatant. Yeah, where's Raj? It's the same thing that I was telling preacher guy Rajo in heavens, in the afterlife, which is sequels and sequels and cut short chayetes that happens all in the afterlife in spite of anything else. Just like me making recordings like this after I'm under persecutory attacks and things that I don't take note of, but the afterlife takes note of it now, but not when I was going through it years ago. But I feel like it's the same type of stuff, to be honest, the whole time. Even though then I couldn't see the afterlife to this clarity, like this severity. So I wasn't able to know that this kind of thing was possible to happen to somebody, even if they not there. Yeah, or if they were somewhere. And it's crazy because it is like that. And you get judged off it. And so that's what brings me to speak about the women. And the women were taking serious victories found in lawsuit captive redress. Meaning people were taking war sufferers and conquerors and turning them into short top redress. And doing things they should do at a time unfitting for the king of Saprajay and Nadres. So they were doing things right, but they weren't keeping it. And so they were keeping it, and they let go of all things in their own spiritual eternal life. And when they did, they left. They didn't care about anything else that was right. And they did not find any righteousness in themselves or in any place they had in heaven for them to dwell. So they couldn't stay. And if God had known that, he wouldn't have blessed them. So if he blessed them, it did worse for him in a good way, but not for them. Yeah, so that's what the hindrance was. It was a thought kept the breast red raised to say that if God blesses the wicked in heaven when they should not be there, then what is that saying about God? It means that heaven is not there. And it's the same laws that apply, even if some people are not on the 3 Semi-Yato 8 Taverjoai. And that's something for the sciences. For God knows love and authorship, but he don't keep it. And so at the end of the day, I wasn't saying nothing or doing nothing wrong. What I did say, that if I was living like royally, allegedly, then some people cared. But if I didn't, then nobody else spared me. And this is the way it was every day. No matter what. And I was in it, winning. But not in a way some people needed me to say Catacut Clement, like Etica true. And at the time I was at home, nobody else cared or thought about me. But if I would have waited any later, I would have left. And I've been home the whole time, but also been in earth, simultaneous, through space-time perfect, if you will, on the yes. So me being who I am, I realize it's not a need to be speedy or to try to fly by Gaga sky, because the things that's happening are right on time. And nobody care about anything else until you greeted me and eatest thee and idle slime. And that's the way things go in the afterlife. But some people not worthy. And it took me a long time to realize that this battle of the general at Fled Radias was no joke. People are fighting and doing things to the best of their ability, but they not doing nothing for God. It's all against the things that they feel is against their freedom, liberty, and their peace. And they don't care about the history. And that's the way it is. So they ain't fighting God in their sight, but they fighting the things that he represents this time, or this modern era, or entire world, Joe. And since they are making themselves an enemy of God, then they can stay that way for all the yadras. And that's the only way things can be, because God wills it. But for those in the new world, they'll have the best life ever in all pre-gyro ship. Because the only time the wicked here It's where God himself uses them. And that's something we all know, naturally. But if God loses memory, which is an uncommon occurrence to have happen in a era, century, or however long, God himself can continue doing the things he was. And these are things I know inspired from heaven and the righteous gospel of Edom and things of this nature. And me being who I am and been, following the paths of righteousness on a straight and narrow track, nobody cared at the time about what I feel, how I feel, or anything of that nature. But if y'all was here and nobody else cared, then y'all understand. But if I follow my life and do things that I'm supposed to and nobody else spared me, then I do nothing else entirely. But if people try to frame me left or right or doing things that they know will result in something that will allow them accessibility into my home, life, royalty, or academship, then they'll know that Eli Rajo is the same as Dexter Jr. or Gaviadro, because Dexter Carter was never here and no other Dexter was there. Where all these things are happening simultaneously in spite of any presence of God and the place that it was there. And so when that happens, that means that nobody else is here or care. But we are no longer in the Holy King James Bible, Wadro. And that's the difference. We are not living according to the gospel of Cherry Luke. So now we're living towards the gospel of Freak Anken Radras, which means Frank and Tan Hot Physics, which is the best thing ever for the end world. And we should have been in this in the year 2007, to be honest. But now we are. And at Frank and Physics, it means that God is looking, and that's all. And when that happens, that means the world is doing something that God can't touch it with. And Frank and Physics was never deployed until right now, today, on this hour, on the day of Sunday, August 6, 2023, at approximately 3:52 and 3:53 p.m. So the law of Ans and Jack Wadras is the one that we here for. The law of Frank Ans and Jack Wadros. And that means for all the gospel people that love gospels and the righteous Rajos, it means that we are in a time period of nothing else but God's laughter or his suffering or grief or mourning. So somebody willed to harm him or somebody willed to help him. Which way it was, no one knows it. But God ended up being the one in laughter for all infinity, but not the one you think, but the one that the pastor said, yeah, but not that one. And so good God, oh good mercy, J, I hear the recording with that, because the period of An Chanaj is here, which is different, because it's no longer the Luke or the gospel of Christ that's independent. Where draws them.